Hello, everyone. Welcome to my book review, part 5, The Mental Game. And this is a review of Road of the King by Patrick Hogan. If you haven't watched my previous 4 videos, I'd recommend that you do so. This was one of the more controversial sections of the book. And he actually, since I'm reading the ebook, not the original print version, he actually took out one of the more controversial parts. First, before I get to the controversial stuff, I'm going to talk about the non-controversial stuff a bit. Which there's kind of like two. I mean, this chapter has a bunch of different sections, but you can sort of divide it up into the how to you know get reads and make yourself harder to read. Sort of like the how do you know if your opponent has a Mirror Force set? If you have a Mirror Force set, how do you make it look like you don't have a Mirror Force set? So he talks about that. Um, and some of the stuff I don't know, I maybe disagree with slightly, only because I think we maybe have like a different play style. And to be honest, mine's probably just worse. He talks about like trying to give off false reads, like if you have a Mirror Force set and your opponent, summons a monster, like, think if you're going to respond, like, oh, make him think it was, I don't know, like a Solemn Warning that you were thinking of using. And then, then they'll, like, never suspect you have a Mirror Force or whatever. And he talks about how, different things work against different player types, and how, to some people, if you're just obviously trying to give off a false read, like if you have a set and it's just obvious that you're trying to make it look like it's not Mirror Force, then they'll be smart enough to know that it actually is Mirror Force, which is, a bit of a mind game, I suppose. And I'll say that my style when I play card games, I've played Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic, and, now I play poker, where, of course, this is even more how I play, is I just try to be like stone faced. I just try to make all of my actions look the same, rather than try to like give off false tells, because he says, oh, it works on certain players but not others, and I'd rather just have be hard to read against everyone, where I'm just stone faced the entire time, rather than sort of the try to figure out what player type they are, and then which way I can send them the wrong signal. That's just me. I mean, obviously, Patrick Hogan's style works pretty well, and Chris Perovic, who I've played against a lot, he's kind of like the same way. Like, he definitely tries to give off false tells a lot, and he makes them, I say, pretty credible. Most of the time. I mean, since I've played him more, I've like started to pick up on it a little more than I used to. But I will say that it has its merits. And he talks about how to gauge players based on their skill level. Some things I sort of agree with or disagree with, like. I think if they have like a Spellground mat, they're like more likely to be a better player, which frankly I'm not sure about. I haven't, from my experience, I haven't necessarily noticed that to be true, and that also probably varies from year to year. Things go, out of style and in style or whatever. So yeah, he talks about skill level. He talks about name recognition, how of course that has something to do with it. And yeah, I mean, this section is okay. Something that I do like is he says for example, if you have like a set Mirror Force, I'm just using Mirror Force because it's the easy example, and you think in your next turn your opponent will attack you with some number of monsters. Ahead, think of under what circumstances you'd use your Mirror Force, so that like say if your opponent like just has I don't know, a Mystic Tomato in play or something, and you have a Mirror Force set, and they just attack with your Tomato. Have already thought ahead whether or not you're going to use your Mirror Force. That way, when they attack with their Mystic Tomato, you're not like sitting there like staring at it, going like, huh, thinking. And sometimes, and I've heard professional Magic players say this too. So I mean, this isn't just Hoban who does this, but it is a good idea. Is they will actually on their turn already think of all the things that they would do on their opponent's turn, depending on what they do. So, and which is why like they'll sometimes sit there and take a lot of time to think on their turn. They're not actually thinking what they're going to do this turn. They think what they're going to do on their opponent's turn. So if they have like a counter spell in their hand, on their turn they might sit there and think, okay, here are the list of things that if my opponent played, I would counterspell, and here are the list of things that if my opponent played, I would not counterspell. And they'll do all of that thinking on their turn. So next turn, if their opponent plays something, and they know they're not going to counterspell, they're just like, okay. And, they just let it through right away. And then maybe their opponent thinks, oh, they didn't even think if they were going to counterspell this. So then they'll just go ahead and play the card that I actually want to counterspell. And then I'm just like, bam, gotcha with my counterspell. So that's like kind of the idea is, he talks about that in a previous section, think ahead. That's, of course, good for technical play. So you're not like sort of struggling to come up with the right play. You just think through it in advance. But it is also good for the mental game. If you think through your plays in advance, you do become harder to read. So I am glad that he mentioned that. That's a good tip. It's not a way that you give off false reads, but it is a way to avoid giving off true reads. So now let's get to the interesting part, which is, the second sort of part of this chapter is he talks about deal making, and a lot of these deals that he's made have at this point begun to be kind of infamous. And he talks about some other questionably legal things that you can do to get extra information, and I'm going to give you an example. If you're a competitive player, you know that Konami does not take particularly well to foreign cards, and they they usually require you to have a translation, right? And this is to this is so that everything's fair. Everyone can read each other's cards, and Hoban talks about, oh, you should make your entire deck foreign. Because then if your opponent asks you for a translation to that card, then, like, that they're not playing it. He talks about a story where, keep in mind, I don't really know, like, what these cards do. But there's some, like, extra deck card, like, Carnagorgon. Cairngorgon. And I guess they wanted to like figure out whether or not their opponent was playing it. So they would be like, oh, hey, do you have an English Cargorgon that I can read or whatever? And then they'd just be like, oh, yeah, I have it like right here in my extra deck. Which, to me, like tricking your opponent into revealing parts of their deck that they are not supposed to reveal. If you're doing that like intentionally to gain an advantage, to me that seems like I don't know if it's necessarily a DQable offense, but it certainly seems like something that the judges are trying to prevent people from doing by having these foreign card rules, and using foreign cards to gain free information is something that I think the people at Konami are actively trying to prevent doing. And if you repeatedly abuse this, I do suspect they will assign you penalties. If any of the high-level judges are watching this, you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. So that's something that I view as kind of controversial. That's not like a deal-making thing, but it's just part of some of the stuff like making it look like you don't have a Mirror Force set. That's obviously not cheating at all. I mean, no one in their right mind would think you're breaking any rules by trying to make your set Speller Trap look like something that it's not. That's of course fine. But some of this stuff I view as being anywhere from a legal gray area to questionably illegal, like this foreign cards thing. And he talks about deal making, things like citing out my vanity's emptiness in exchange for getting you to cite out yours. Um, a lot of us, of course, know the famous story where Patrick Hoban has the Dijin, I think it's called Releaser of Rituals card in his deck. It's played as a one of, and his opponent also plays it as a one of, and then he says to his opponent, "Hey, I'll side out mine if you side out yours." Now the card isn't limited to one; you can play up to three of it. So they both side out theirs face up on the table, and then Patrick Hoban takes another one from his side deck and sides in it as well. And of course it is legal, and Konami has clarified, or Julia, I should say, clarified. Her attitude is something along the lines of, I would recommend not making any deals because your opponent is probably making deals that are disadvantageous to you. There are no rules against making deals, and neither player has any responsibility to uphold that deal. So basically, what she's saying is, hey, it's technically legal to take advantage of your opponent via deals, and for that reason, I'd recommend not taking any deals. So, with all of these, scummy deals like the what's it called? Yeah, like the Dijin thing. I kind of made a post on Duelist Grounds that said, here's why I think you shouldn't do this, logically speaking. And to be clear, these are deals that are things like the second Dijin thing. And it's a long post. I'm not gonna read it all, but I am gonna, link it in the description. Where basically the idea is, they say, if you make these deals that clearly take advantage of your opponent, and your opponent does this, and you develop the reputation as someone who makes these scummy deals, then it'll be hard to make friends within the community, and then makes it harder to build a circle, which is what the last section was about, was building your circle. And part of the way that you do that is you need to be nice, sociable, you need to have a good image in the community, and damaging your image by making these scummy deals is going to hurt you there. And something that I proposed as kind of more of a hypothetical thought experiment type thing, I'm not actually recommending anyone do this, is if you can make these deals and you're not bound to uphold them, it would not be easy, but it would also certainly not be impossible to learn some form of sleight of hand, the kind that magicians do, where, say for example, we both have, whatever it is, we both have the Monarch Stormforth in our decks and a Monarch Mirror, and I tell my opponent, hey, I'll side out my 3 Monarch Stormforth if you side out yours. And they say, okay, deal. And we both side our Monarch Stormforth face up. Now afterwards, I could, after we do that, before we've, presented our decks for game 2, I could use some sort of sleight of hand, while they're not looking, or sort of, put the Monarch Stormforth sort of off to the corner of the mat somewhere where they're not looking. And then I put them back into my deck. So now, my opponent has sided out all 3 of their Monarch Stormforths, while I haven't kept mine in, even though I said I was going to. Now, recall from what Julia said, me doing that is perfectly legal, because you're allowed to make deals, and you are not obligated to uphold your end of the deal. And this is, clearly possible if you watch any of these ridiculous magicians on TV that can do things like, make cards appear in, someone's beer bottle and stuff. I mean, if they can do that, I'm sure they could, easily do this, Monarch Stormforth, trick where, oh, it looks like I'm siding it out, but I'm really not. I mean, that wouldn't be too hard for someone to learn how to do, I imagine. So then Patrick Hoban, in response to this, now keep in mind, this is supposed to be a book about winning tournaments where he says, you should take every edge possible, like making these deals. Patrick Hoban, in a post on Duelist Grounds, which I will also link to in the description, says, I still choose not to take some advantages that I could choose to take. And, he clarifies that, in a later post, uh, where I talk about the, sleight of hand thing, um, I am not going to cite out my one copy of Vanities and put it back in when they aren't looking, because that's not in the spirit of competition. Now, this concept of spirit of competition isn't something that he talks about in his book. He just sort of says, oh, you should make every deal that you could, you should get every edge. But then when I bring up this part about, hey, you could just make it look like you're citing something out and not do it, he says, well, that's against the spirit of competition. And obviously everyone's entitled to their opinion, but the issue is, where your definition of what's in the spirit of competition, someone else might disagree. A lot of people thought that what he did with the second Dijin wasn't within the spirit of competition, that was taking, advantage of someone in a in an unfair way. Not, unfair in terms of the rules way, but unfair in terms of the spirit of competition way. And, there's a lot of other sort of scummy mind game things that you can do as well to get even more advantages. And Hoban, doesn't do these. So, to me, it's not clear, his book doesn't address it from a moral perspective. Where do you draw the line, right? And, I say I would refrain from making these deals in general because you don't want to develop this negative reputation. So I'm more on the side of just play within the normal realm of the game that you're supposed to. Whereas he's sort of like in the middle. Like, he's obviously not advocating something that's clearly against the rules, like stacking. He doesn't advocate that. And so he's not telling anyone to cheat, but he's also telling people to do things that are within the rules that the player base might view as kind of scummy, but not necessarily everything that's within the rules, like the sleight of hand thing. So, to me, it's, his, at the end of the day, I think Hoban's just going to make whatever deals he wants, right? Like, I don't think Hoban's going to watch my video and be like, huh, Alan, you got a point. I'm going to stop making deals now. But, for other people who are, reading this book and, also reading his Duelist Grounds post, to me, he seems kind of inconsistent on this issue. I don't necessarily understand where the line is. Why is it okay to do the second Dijin thing, but not okay to do the sleight of hand thing? There are two ways, essentially, of making it look like you're citing something out, but not really doing so. They're just different. One is, he, as Hoban says, one is outwitting you. That's what he thinks the second Dijin thing is outwitting you. And the other is on the same level as, hey, look at that flashing light behind you. And I see a clear difference between the two in terms of besting my opponent during a competition. And, the other argument that I made on my Duelist Grounds post about all of these, sort of deals, and the fact that Konami is not entirely clear on which deals are okay under what circumstances, is there used to be a couple of paragraphs in the book. This was in the original print version. It is no longer in the ebook. He took it out, which is good, about how, he would potentially offer to his opponent, hey, if we both side out our Vanity's Emptiness, I'll let you go first in Game 2. When really Hoban wants to go second the whole time. So he actually just gets two things that he wants at once, which is, he gets his opponent to side out their Vanities, and he gets to go second, which is like awesome, right? Now, since then, Konami clarified that this is collusion, and which is why he removed it from the books. He doesn't want to tell people to cheat. So, to me, it's, the issue is, one day you make a deal and it might be okay, and then the next day they cite it's collusion, and then all of a sudden you can't play for 2 years. So, to me, it's just the easiest thing, the most simple thing to do is just don't make these deals, because A, it protects your reputation, it keeps your friends, and, it protects your reputation online as well. And, secondly, it's this, hey, a lot of this stuff is, pretty close to the line, and all it takes is for one day for someone to decide that that's over the line. So, that's an issue that I have there. In his book, he just kind of makes it more like, oh, get every edge that you have kind of a thing. But on Duelist Grounds, he clarifies that no, not necessarily every edge, just some and not others in terms of this, mental game aspect. So, that's kind of the issue that I have with this whole book. And just to leave you guys with something to think about, something that I came up with a while ago that's another sort of mental game thing is I want you to think about, whether this is ethical. Is this something that Yu-Gi-Oh players should be doing? So, I'm going to present you with this scenario. And I have never done this, and I've never known anyone who has done this, but it is, again, sort of another hypothetical that I came up with. Something that you could do to get a very big advantage on your opponent that is entirely legal, but is also very scummy. And here's what it is. Obviously, throughout Yu-Gi-Oh, whether it's the advantage of going first or going second, everyone wants to win their die roll, so to speak. Now, the Yu-Gi-Oh rulebook, and you can go check this right now if you want, whether you pull out your copy in real life or look up online. It says that going first must be decided by a coin flip or rock, paper, scissors. Now, obviously, if players can agree to something else, normally they agree to a die roll. But if players cannot agree on which method to use to decide who goes first, they must use a die roll or a coin flip. Or sorry, not a die roll or coin flip. Coin flip or RPS. Coin flip and RPS. Die roll, unacceptable. So, here's what you do. Imagine you're at, OICS and you're whatever record you are. You're 3-0 or something. And you sit down to play your opponent, and your opponent says, he pulls out his dice and says, high roll. High roll question mark, asking if that's fine. And you say, no, I'd like to either flip a coin or do rock, paper, scissors. Now, 99% of opponents will have a problem with that. Players are very attached to their dice. And, they're going to say, hey, why can't I roll a dice? And then you just make up something like, oh, I don't know, I don't like dice, it might be weighted, blah, blah, blah. You call over a judge. Chances are the table judge is going to not know how to resolve the situation because it's something that rarely comes up. So what they're going to do is they are going to get the head judge. Meanwhile, just be sure to just seem as weird and douchebaggy to your opponent as possible. The idea is that the whole point of this thing is to try to piss our opponent off and make him not in a clear state of mind. And, by the way, I would recommend even bringing a rule book with you so you could show, oh, hey, it's right here. So, you show your opponent the rule book while they're getting the head judge over, and you mention how, oh, you're such a stickler for the rules, blah, blah, blah. Head judge gets over there. You show him the rule book or whatever. He'll most likely say, yes, since the two of you cannot agree, you have to do a coin flip or an RPS. And keep in mind, since this is a YCS, it'll take quite some time for the judge to get over here. So now you've, waited all this time. Keep in mind your opponent, he sat down, he was mentally prepared to play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, and now he's had to wait. He's, sort of hot and bothered. And, you'll get the point of this. So you say, okay, would you like to do a coin flip or an RPS? Now, most people thinking that a coin is likely to be weighted will pick RPS. Now, if they pick a coin, what you do is you make sure to have some sort of silver dollar thing, a big coin. Because to most people, big coins will look like, oh, it's like, a big coin. It could be, very weighted. So when you pull out this, big silver dollar thing and, act like, okay, I'll flip, they will probably change their mind and say, all right, let's do rock, paper, scissors. So the whole point of this entire thing is to ensure that you play rock, paper, scissors with your opponent to determine who goes first, right? Now, why is this advantageous, right? Rock, paper, scissors, both players have a chance of winning. True in theory, psychologically speaking, not true. And here's why. there are two parts of this tactic. The first is to make sure you play rock paper scissors. The second is to look like some big douchebag, you know, who probably lives in his mom's basement and doesn't want to roll a dice because you're some sort of weird outcast. And you've now had to wait all this time to even start playing. So your opponent is not in a clear state of mind when you are about to play RPS. Now, since you've been waiting all this time, what does your opponent want to do? What is the number one thing? They want to get this match over with. They likely hate you, and they want to start the match now and end it as soon as possible. So because of that, when you're playing rock, paper, scissors, psychologically, which things are they most likely to throw? Rock, paper, or scissors? The least likely one that they are to throw is scissors, because that takes the most effort with your hands. If you have, your hands right now, to make this shape takes much less effort than to make this shape or this shape. Also, psychologically speaking, men have a bias towards rock in general. But the bias towards rock will be even greater since your opponent just wants to move on and start playing the match. So they are most likely not going to go rock, paper, scissors, shoot. They are probably just going to go rock, paper, scissors, shoot. And because of this, you have a more than 50% chance, I would, almost close to 100% chance of winning the RPS by throwing paper. Because they are almost never going to throw scissors. They are going to throw, most likely they're going to throw rock. Second most likely is going to be paper, because making this shape does not take much effort. And, third most likely is going to be scissors. And you can test this with a friend. What you can do is intentionally start an argument with someone, keep the argument going for 10 minutes, and then in the middle of the argument say, hey, let's play rock, paper, scissors. 9 times out of 10, they're going to throw rock. So you can do this tactic to win the die roll, so to speak, like 90% of the time, because they're going to throw rock so often. And, even if they don't throw rock, they'll probably throw paper, and then they'll tie with your paper, and then you can just throw paper again, and they'll probably switch off to rock. So anyways, the whole point of me explaining this tactic, which, I don't care if you guys try it, I don't play card games anymore, is the idea of would this be acceptable? This manipulating of the rules for psychological advantage to go first in a match. Technically, it's within the rules, but is it moral is the question. And that is what Hoban doesn't answer in this section. Which mind games are moral? Which are ethical, I guess, is really ethics is really the better word than morals, I think. Which ones are ethical? Because in his book, like I said, he doesn't really address the ethics question that much, but the theme of the book is sort of play to win, do whatever gives you an edge. But then he says in his Duelist Grounds post that there are some edges that I choose not to take. And yet this is the person who is trying to sort of tell everyone that he's the king, right? He does whatever he can. Everything's about competition to him, but in some senses it's not. So I mean, you get the point that I'm trying to make by now. It's not clear to me, and I think a lot of this stuff about these questionably ethical deals, I think could have just been left out, right? I mean, because as Hoban says, there are some things that I could do that I don't. So really, I think you should just leave it to everyone's individual decisions. If someone doesn't feel comfortable making some sort of deal, I think they have the right to do so, because in their opinion, it might not be in the spirit of competition. Just the same way that Hoban had, it's perfectly valid for him to believe that the sleight of hand thing is not within the spirit of competition, despite the fact that it is legal. So things like that are a more personal decision, I personally think should have been left out of the book. That's just me. Let me know what your thoughts are on the whole, sleight of hand thing, the, using psychology to let your opponent go first thing, and this whole, deal making thing in general. I think you should just avoid all that garbage and just play a normal game of Yu-Gi-Oh. But and I think my opinion is the majority opinion, but I would be interested to hear from people who disagree. Hope you have been enjoying these videos. I have been trying to put a lot of thought into this review. So have a good one, guys.